Hey, good morning, Al.
Good morning, Craig.
Well, listen, there's a little bit of news today that's hitting the headlines. A 3.8% annual inflation rate, as announced by the Trump Labor Department. But before we go there, you were very generous to come over here to Easton on Saturday for a conversation that I was delighted to have with ABC's John Karl, the Washington, D.C. chief correspondent for ABC News and also co-anchor of the weekend program. It was a 1 hour conversation, and it was pretty wide ranging. And I just thought we'd give a share some of our takeaways from
Yeah,
it. Why don't I kick it over to you and let you start?
okay, fine. I'm happy to do that. I was delighted to be able to get over there. I don't get to Easton very much, but I love going to Easton because people recognize me. In Annapolis, I'm anonymous because nobody sees the spy, but in Easton, people recognize me. This is a great day. As I just mentioned to you, when we took the dog out this morning, we usually go to a little coffee shop, and after the deal on Saturday, we had a quick dinner and we were talking about our dogs and how they respond to motorcycles. Well, we had about 300 motorcycles in a police parade uh, uh, run in front of the coffee shop. We were luckily in the coffee shop. She still reacted, but we were able to calm her down. If we had been outside where we usually are, uh, we probably would still be chasing her. But in any event, it was great to watch you interview John Carl. Now, some of us get different things from these interviews, and uh, while Carl said he didn't go to journalism school, he pointed out his daughter went to Medill Journalism School at Northwestern, which I'm on the board of. So I consider that a personal connection. Uh, you know, uh, it was a wonderful interview, and John Carl is a terrific reporter. I'm a big fan. Uh, he's one of the co-hosts on the ABC Sunday show with George Stephanopoulos, and of course George worked with me in the Clinton campaign, and so I watched that religiously. What my I've got a couple of reactions to it. One, just how difficult it is to cover the White House, and it must be particularly hard with Trump uh, because Trump, as Carl related, is really the most accessible president probably maybe ever. But he's also uh, a very manipulative guy when he dealings with his press. I think Trump understands modern media, TV, the press better than any president of at least my lifetime. And you and I both work with presidents who are pretty good with the press. Uh, you know, uh, and when I thought about it, there's such an aura for covering the White House. I mean, as a graduate student, I came to Washington in the first class of Northwestern's Washington program. It's now the Medill News Service. And uh, I had a chance to cover the White House. And you're incredibly awed by just going into the press room as a reporter, and the people you meet are beyond belief. I mean, the guy who handled me and handled our program on President Johnson's staff at that time was Tom Johnson, who later became the publisher of the L.A. Times and then head of CNN. You became a lifelong friend. So it's really something. So I was really, I was struck. I mean, it's such an awe-inspiring thing. And as you pointed out, to get an interview with the president in a normal presidency is a very difficult thing. I mean, you got to schedule it. The president goes through all sorts of briefings. People try to put limits on it, but talks to these guys. He calls them every day. And Karl is probably one of his favorites for calling. I guess Karl and Maggie Haberman of the New York Times are the two people he calls the most. Uh, and how do you balance that? Because when the president says something, it's the news. I mean, he's the most important person in the world. and yet you often know that he's trying to manipulate the story because, sometimes outright uh, lies. I mean, because as we've talked,
I thought it was funny that
yeah,
John Karl said
yeah,
that, the president calls and asks John for his view
right,
of what's happening, and he says, "I'm careful to only say what I say on
right,
television because I don't
right.
wanna be an advisor to him." It's a very unusual relationship. You take me back also to, the time when we were more active in government.
Yeah,
There are plenty of our friends who had felt an adversarial relationship with the press, but I know you well enough, and I know in my case, I had a a high degree, really, of mutual respect. They're smart, they have fascinating backgrounds. At that time, in those years, we got more time to get to know each other, and so when President Reagan would go to the ranch in Santa Barbara, the traveling press corps and those of us on the staff would go out to dinner, would go horseback riding. We got to know their kids, so it was a much more kind of normal relationship building process. And John, I thought, was very forthcoming in talking about how he came to get interested in journalism and the kind of things he goes through. But I it saddens me because I think now these interactions are so adversarial. There's not a lot of mutual respect, and it's pretty hostile.
yeah. Well, the that's really true. I mean, the press always was our. I mean, I always thought the press was our friend. Obviously, there are times when you don't like the stories they're going to write, but uh, you know, when obviously, and I didn't travel with President Clinton because I did, as much as you did with President Reagan, because I was not really in the White House, but he'd invite me to go on these trips. And as you said, one of the things our assignment was that. Uh, to go out for the dinner with the press people and talk to them and give them background and all sorts of things on whatever the story of the day was. Uh, but and I tried, before he was president, uh, I spent about a year on the road with President Clinton and Governor Clinton, and we were actually in about 25 states. And reporters traveled with us, and Clinton, like Reagan, a very personable guy. People like him. He likes to be with people, and so we had a lot of interactions and with the press. Some of them traveled with us, and that all changes when you get to the White House because then they have to go through the formal uh, practice or process in Bill Clinton becomes President Clinton or Ronald Reagan becomes President Reagan, and it's a different deal, except
Yeah,
with President
so
Trump.
true, so true. I
Except,
so I want to ask if you had like a favorite story. Mine, I think, has to be the fact that President Trump told John Carl that when he was in the first term, he wasn't as familiar with things, and he had to rely on other people. And as the second term was beginning, he said, I know pretty much how to get stuff done here." The example that John Carl gave was an amazing one, and it had to do with actually Inauguration Day, or the beginning of Trump's second term, when Trump and Biden exit the White House to get into the limo, and President Biden gets in first because he's on the right side, and Trump takes has to walk around the car. When Biden sits in the back seat, which he's of course has done thousands of times, he looks over and there's an electronic device sitting on the armrest, which he'd never seen. And he was alarmed, and he said to the Secret Service, "What is this? How'd this get in here?" At which point Trump gets in the car and he says, "Oh, that's my cell phone." Somehow Donald Trump, not yet president, had managed to have a staff person get his cell phone placed in the presidential limo so that he could have it as he rode up to Capitol Hill. Great inside story and
right.
an amazing story about Trump. So that
Yeah.
kind of was my favorite. How about you?
Well, that was really, I thought, the most interesting, or one of the most interesting as well. Uh, but one of the things is you and I know that Secret Service people who work the White House, including the uniform guys, don't change very often. They outlast administrations. I mean, when I went, when Clinton got elected to the White House, the same guy was working the one of the desks at the door between the old EOB and the West Wing, who was there with it when I was with Jimmy Carter. So my guess is he had a Secret Service guy who did it. But I thought one of the most interesting things is both after the attempt in Pennsylvania, Butler, Pennsylvania, to assassinate Trump, and the incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Trump, I mean, after the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Karl one calls the president to see if he's coming back to the dinner because they had announced that the program would go on, which it didn't, obviously. And then at I think he said it was at 7:25 in the morning, the day after, president who gives him a call on his home phone, which nobody uses. I mean, I have the same thing here. I have a home phone. The only people who call me on it are, basically commercial calls who trying to sell me something because they get it out of the computer. Nobody else uses it. But I mean, just imagine that. It's such a different deal. I mean, covering the White House these days is got. We knew it was a 24-hour deal when we were there, but it's got to be almost unbelievable with enormous pressure, and then how to balance what you get with a guy who tries to dominate the news every day. So he may tell you something that is entirely contrary to what he said to you 24 hours earlier, but it's the policy of the United States because he says it.
Yeah. Says
How
it
do you
or
deal
writes
with
it in
that,
his tweet.
right?
Hey, before we go, I guess we have to at least acknowledge this fact that the Labor Department now says, surprise, surprise, with rising fuel prices, food prices, and other prices, inflation is running at an annualized rate of 3.8%, higher than a lot of the experts thought. This is just further bad news for the administration, I fear.
Yep. Well, they're driven by gas prices, but the other interesting thing, and when I worked for President Carter on inflation, I felt this every month. It's uh, even the underlying rate is up a little bit. And the reason, if you take out food and gas prices are probably going to be most affected by the war in Iran and the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. But it works its way through to everything. And this is probably just the beginning, and it's going to make things very difficult for President Trump and the Republicans this fall. And it gets to the question we ask every week: when are the Republicans going to start to break with Trump?
Yeah, true. Well, listen, we'll talk about all this more on Thursday, I'm sure. Thanks again for coming over to Easton and being part of the conversation with John. And we all had a chance to spend a little bit of time
Right?
together. We'll see you
Yep.
Thursday.
Great. See ya.
Take care.